As an entrepreneur mom, it's very easy to get bogged down with all the expectations on you.
So in today's episode, we're going to be chatting about why you need to redefine mom guilt and how to let it go.
Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Tired of putting in long hours doing what everyone says you should and still not making money? Sounds like you're ready for Lifestyle Builders. We'll help you get back on track, taking action, and seeing results. Head over to joinlifestylebuilders.com today to get started.
All right. So it might seem kind of funny that Tom is here chatting with me on mom guilt, but I feel that he's a very important piece of this because he's seeing it from the other side, and he's seen what it has done to me over the years as I've struggled to get through mom guilt.
Yeah, well, and before we get too far into this, so we're talking about mom guilt today, and in our next episode, we're actually going to be talking about dad guilt.
Yep.
But I want to redefine that a little bit, because what we're really talking about today, part of it is like being a woman, being a mom. Part of it is also that role that we typically have in society of the caretaker,
yep.
The person that stays home, that type of thing. And a lot of what we'll get into in this episode is the guilt that comes around that from a variety of sources.
Yes.
And, we've each experienced some of this in our own way. And I mean, we know from talking to people that this is such a huge thing out there. And because entrepreneurs are such a small percent of society, it's even worse and even more challenging because most people don't understand like what we actually do and what our days look like. So I think the guilt is actually laid on a lot more. Like, oh, you're home all day. Why do you have your kids in daycare?
Well, and we talked about some of this in our parental guilt episode, which was, I think, 111, let go of parental guilt. So, I mean, some of the themes are very similar there. But we want to say, obviously, we know that it is 2019. Family dynamics can be a number of things. They can look a number of ways. But what's important here is that you listen to both episodes.
Yep.
So don't say, oh, I'm not a dad, I don't need to listen to the dad guilt one. Or, oh, I'm not a mom, I don't need to listen to the mom guilt one. These are both very important for whatever your dynamic is, whether you are a mom or a dad or the wife or the husband or spouse, partner, whatever you want to label yourself. Both of these episodes talk about the issues that somebody is feeling in your relationship. So that being said, let's dive in.
So the first thing I always look at, and whenever I know I do it, and I know I ask you as well, is, when you're feeling guilty about something, not just pushing that aside, but actually taking some time to dive in and understand why. And usually what's happening when you're feeling guilty is there's some expectation of the way things should be. And there's a reality. Yeah. And there's a reality of how things are. And that disconnect is what causes a lot of that guilt. And it's not until you sit down and actually take a look at that and explore like why that you can then get to the heart of it and ultimately make a solution for it.
Well, and I mean, to be honest, the entire core that this circles around, this guilt, is expectations. So like you said, there's these expectations. They're obviously not being met. What is that gap in between them? But I think in particular for moms these days, there is this idea that we all have to be super women. So, back in the day, moms were more automatically assumed to be the caretakers. So you had to take care of the home and take care of the kids. Now we're in this very weird transition where we're trying to move away from those cultural norms and societal norms, but we haven't yet figured out what that end result is. So we're kind of in limbo where now it's completely normal for a mother to be a working mother and have a job. A lot of moms are the breadwinners in their families, so they've kind of switched into that role that the men usually carry. But we're also still expected to be the primary caretaker and the keeper of the home. So we're trying to juggle all of these jobs and wear all of these hats without really understanding what that means for us in a mental space. And, I think obviously we'll talk about this a lot in the dad guilt episode, but I think men are caught in that same transition of societal and cultural norms. And it's like, we're both trying to figure out where we land and how we manage all of that. And there's a lot of outside expectations on us from society, from a cultural aspect, from our friends, from our family. And so not only are we putting our own expectations on ourselves, we're also trying to deal with all of these external ones. And a lot of times it becomes very confused in your mind. And when you're already sleep deprived and working a lot and you've got to deal with your spouse, you've got to raise your kids, it just puts all this extra pressure on you that ultimately makes it harder to sift through those expectations.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is, if you're listening to this episode, you're either already an entrepreneur or you're looking to start your own business. And so that's really, to me, the first step that a lot of people take to go against that traditional path, and to go against some of those norms, because the norm, at least here in the United States, is
have a job.
You go to school, you get good grades, you get into college, which usually requires getting into a whole bunch of debt. And then you get out of college, you're now already in the hole with debt. You're trying to find a job. So you get a job, and then you get on this like rat race of constantly trying to pay off your debt, but then you spend more money as you make
Take
more
care
money
of your
and
family.
Yeah. And so that's the path that most people are on. And that was the path, like for me, that I saw very early on when we got out of college, that I'm like, all right, we're on this path and I don't like where it's going. And so everyone that is a lifestyle builder, everyone that's listening to this has had that moment where they're like, I don't like the path I'm on and I'm going to do something different. And you guys know that when you first do that, all the people that are on that path are instantly going to have a different feeling towards you, either because they're jealous, because they don't understand, because they care for you, and they have this fear that because you're doing something different or you're doing something that they weren't able to do, that it's somehow bad. So we're already used to kind of going against the grain, but I think it's even more challenging when you're already doing that, and then you get the gender that gets added on, the gender expectations, our backgrounds and how we were raised and what our families looked like, and trying to come to terms, because being an entrepreneur requires a lot of growth. And one of the things I think it comes up to is really understanding your stories about how the world is. And a lot of times when you start challenging one, you start challenging a lot of them. And then that makes you even start to question, who am I? And then even start to saying, this is who I am now, or who all these pressures or things have made me, but who do I really want to be? And this is the tough work that people don't realize. Like I had a post up yesterday about not just quitting your job like too early to start a business. This is the stuff people don't realize. When you start a business, you go through all this personal growth and asking these questions and really refining or digging deep to uncover who you really are. And it's challenging, but it's so rewarding, because what it does is it lets you start to let go of all these things that aren't serving you and get aligned with how you want things to be and how they actually are, not the expectations that everyone else has put on or that you've put on yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be frank here. Let's talk about what happens when you cannot rein in your mom guilt. It is a very, very slippery and deep rabbit hole to go down, because once you let one external expectation come and affect you and make you feel bad about yourself and make you start having the self-doubt and the negative talk in your mind, like, oh, I'm such a bad mom. Why couldn't I just do this thing that everyone else out there thinks that I should be doing? Once you let one in, they're all going to start coming in. It's all going to start coming in. You're going to be listening to it even when you don't realize you're listening to it. You're going to be hearing it subtly in your mind when you look at people's social media feeds and see how that awesome mom threw this amazing birthday party for her kid, and why can't you do that? Oh, you're just such a bad mom. It is a very, very dangerous place to be. And I can say that because personal experience, I've been there, and it led to depression. It led to burnout. You cannot possibly live up to everyone else's expectations of you. It's not possible.
Nor should you.
Nor should you.
Yeah.
But unless you are aware of those little sneaky negative self-talks and people's expectations that are coming in, unless you turn and look and make yourself aware of those, it is really hard to turn it off and stop the cycle.
So obviously you've been through a lot of this, and I've been there watching and supporting. And I think one of the biggest things I'll say has been a challenge for me has been seeing you go through this, because a lot of this is inner work and self-discovery. And for all the problem solvers out there, what we do when we see a problem is we go in and try to solve it. And one of the most challenging things for me in supporting you and kind of working through a lot of this is not trying to solve the problem. Or the best question that I don't always ask, but it's good when I do, is what do you want here? Do you just want to be heard and support, or are you looking for a solution and help with that? And I just used to automatically assume it was, jump in and help. And now when I remember to ask that question, or when you politely remind me to ask that question, then that helps to rein that in. But this is really a journey that you're going on. And one of the things I know, because you've been through this, is that you've got this simple process that you go through when this comes up to help work through that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So obviously, once you become aware that you are letting these other things in and you're letting them control how you are living your life, the one thing that really helps me, and it's something that, our therapist has talked about, different mindset coaches that I've talked to and worked with, is as soon as that thought comes through, identify where it's coming from. Is that coming from an expectation you have of yourself, or is it coming from an expectation that somebody else has? So once you can answer that question, you move into the next step, which is reviewing it. Okay, that's a thought that somebody else told me or said something that made me think I should be doing that. Is that actually valid? Do I actually think that I should be doing that? Or am I just giving in to outside social pressures because I'm worried about what other people are going to think of me? Because that's a big one. I know you guys all out there. It's like, that's something that's really hard to turn off. We all want to be liked. Is that something I'm doing just because I want someone else to think a certain way about me? So you start to kind of dig into, where is it coming from? Is that actually how I feel about that particular situation? And then once you've answered that question, you can be like, oh, no, I don't care about that. I don't care about what that other person thinks. Then you can adjust your behavior accordingly. You don't care about what they think? Tell them, or say, hey, that's great for you, but it doesn't work for me. This is how I want to show up. This is how I run my life. This is how we raise our kids. This is how we're running our family. Like, stand up for yourself and make the people aware around you that, you aren't going to give in to their expectations of you just because they think a certain way.
I'll tell you, and this is a tough process, but on the other side, when you come out of this, a couple things happen. One, it's so freeing, because there is nothing more draining than trying to be someone you're not, or live up to an expectation that isn't in alignment with what you want to be. And so just like when you start letting these things in, it can be a slippery slope. This can actually be a slippery slope on the other way. That's a positive slippery slope.
Not a slippery slope. It would be a nicely stairwell slope.
There you go. But what it does is you're like, oh, I don't have to live up to those expectations. Oh, I can actually get clear on what I want and live more in alignment that way. And that sheds so much baggage and makes everything so much easier, because it's in alignment with what you want to do.
Well, and let's talk about, okay, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe you go through and you accept that you've just felt this expectation, and you review it, and it is something that you do feel the guilt is valid. Like, okay, let's talk about a common one: kids and screen time. There are times in our life where that feeling comes in. I'm like, oh man, they just watched YouTube for 3 hours. I feel so guilty right now. What do you do with that? Well, you don't let the guilt sit there. You accept the fact that, okay, yep, they had more screen time than we usually let them have. Whatever the reasons were, whatever the situation was, let it go. What are you going to do moving forward so that guilt flag doesn't keep flaring up?
Yeah.
Let's make it a point to discuss, hey guys, you've been having a lot of screen time. Let's turn it off and let's do something else. Or set timers so that when they start watching, there's an automatic outside source telling them time's up, and it doesn't always have to be on you to be the timekeeper. Talk to your spouse. ask them for help. If you've been alone with the kids for the entire day and that's why they've had so much screen time because you were trying to get stuff done, ask for help. Send grandma over. Whatever it is you have to do to then adjust that behavior or that situation that caused that little guilt flag to raise up. Because that's all it is. It's a trigger. It's a little flag. It's telling you there is something happening here that doesn't feel in alignment.
And that is the most important thing, because what a lot of people will do is it'll raise up and then they don't go through the rest of the steps that you talked about. And then they just kind of sit in limbo and it raises up again. And every time it raises up, it makes you feel a little bit worse.
It's not going anywhere. You're just adding the guilt pile on top, higher and higher. And then you've got all these other things in your life adding the guilt pile. Like this is what weighs you down and forces you down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And this is like, to that point, when those things come up, just first acknowledge them, because when you do that and you realize that it's just something to pay attention to, something that's important that we got to work through, now you can actually take the next step. But if you don't take that first step of acknowledging, identifying, and being aware of it, it's just going to keep coming up and it's going to keep frustrating you without being able to make a change. It's kind of funny. When I was in grad school, there was one of our professors told us these couple stories. And this one that it just reminded me of his mother, when she would make the Thanksgiving ham or whatever, would cut the ends off and put it in the oven. And one day when he was older, he asked his mom, well, why do you do that? And then she didn't know. So she went and asked her mom and, or asked her sister or something. And she's like, oh, I don't know, ask, mom. So then she went and asked mom. And at the end of the day, what it came down to was years before, their great-grandparents, the stove they had wasn't big enough, so they had to cut the ends of the ham off to fit in the stove. But that just kept being passed down, and nobody questioned it. And once they questioned it, they realized that this is no longer valid, and the change was, well, we're not going to cut that off and waste it. We're just going to use it right. But oftentimes, where something started, especially if it's been going on for a long time, you don't even remember where it started or why you're doing something, and just taking some time to dive in and understand that will then allow you to come back and say, oh, maybe I did this for a very specific reason at one point, but it's no longer valid, so I can just let it go.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny because a lot of us carry our history and our baggage with us into adulthood, and we never truly unpack that. Which is one of the greatest things about therapy for me is being able to unpack that and being able to do so with a professional who's able to pick out the pieces that are still affecting you now and address them and figure out how to let them go, how to change behaviors. And one of the best things that I've done around this whole thought of mom guilt is kind of reset my boundaries, redefined what those things are, and who do I ultimately care about, what opinions do I care about, and which ones don't I. And even sometimes the ones that I care about, it's hard, but you still have to go through and set your boundaries with them, because sometimes it's the ones that are closest to you that can make you feel the most guilt.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a lot of us, parents like to say things, parents like to make comments, and they don't ultimately even know that they're doing it. You sometimes have to stand up and say, hey, when you say that, you make me feel really bad about myself, and set the boundary. Say, please respect my boundaries and respect my life. And I need you to change up how you're speaking to me in that manner, how you're communicating with me.
And what's funny? When you don't do that, this is the craziest thing that we all do to ourselves. That person, they might drop a comment and not even think about it again. But it's weighing on your mind. And the question you have to ask is that serving you? And it's crazy how much we let stuff that other people do weigh on us, and we never resolve it or let it go. And that person couldn't think twice about it. They don't even realize it's a thing. But we're essentially self-sabotaging by keeping those things, with us instead of going through this and then letting it go.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier, for example, with people that don't matter. We have our book coming out this year. And one of the things we've been discussing is, we're going to get haters. We already do, with some of the views that we have on things. For example,
Don't quit your
yesterday.
job.
I put a post up, don't quit your job. And I had all these people like, no, you should burn the boats, blah, blah, blah. So there's going to be people that disagree. The thing is, who is that coming from? And then how much credit or weight should you put onto it?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we let somebody that we should give a lot of weight to have the same amount as somebody that we should give nothing to. And ironically, in some cases, the person that we shouldn't really give any weight to, we end up giving a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that and then putting it all in perspective, is really a big thing too.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of setting your boundaries is understanding enough about yourself to know those things that are going to ultimately trigger you. So part of my boundaries are boundaries on myself to not get caught up in reading reviews of things. If I know that those are going to affect me more than they affect you, there's no reason for me to even bother doing that. I know it's going to have a negative effect. I don't need to read the bad ones. I only need to read the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let you read them first, and then you can show me the good ones, and I'll ignore the rest. So it's about knowing yourself. It's about setting up those boundaries. It's about not being afraid to say no, which is really hard. I know a lot of moms feel this way because as the primary caretaker for many, many years, we have been the ones making a lot of those little daily decisions. And it becomes a lot harder to say no when you know there's going to be an epic battle behind it. So sometimes we just give in and we don't say no. And then those build into what those expectations are. And then it's harder to say no because those expectations have been built in that, oh, mommy always says yes. Mommy lets us do this stuff. So don't be afraid to say no to your partner, to your kids, to the PTA that they want you to volunteer yet again for your kids' school. Like you have to set the boundaries, and you have to say no to the things you don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that too is realizing that you don't have to be Superwoman.
Nope,
And
you do not.
And asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the best things that we've done, like last year, we set a theme for the year to put ourselves first. And that was in our personal health, mental and physical, in our relationship, in our everything. And one of the things that most people don't realize is that the most successful people are the ones that have the most support.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting support for their personal lives. They're getting support for their, physical health. They're like, that's why we're such a big proponent of therapy, because we all have stuff that we're carrying with us, and that stuff drains on us and adds stress, and so that's helping with that. But then it's also whatever you really want to, whatever's important to you,
Mm-hmm.
invest into and get support with. Like we always tell people, like, when we started going to marriage therapy, the first reaction everyone had was like, oh, what's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And what I told people is I was like, look, this is important to us. It's one of the most important things. And what we realized was that we were investing the least amount into it. We're investing the least amount of money, the least amount of time, and it wasn't intentional. And so I think it's important for people to realize that asking for support is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a really big sign of strength, because in order to ask for support, you have to be comfortable enough to first acknowledge that there's something that isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And then be confident enough in yourself to say, I'm going to go get help so I can improve this. I can be better. I can show up better, etc.
Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things for me was back to self-care. Don't be afraid to practice actual self-care, and don't let the guilt come in about it. A lot of things that I've heard from other moms is we prioritize ourselves at the bottom of the stack.
Mm-hmm.
We're always worried about everyone else being okay, like take care of our husbands or wives, take care of our kids, take care of the house. If you're an entrepreneur, take care of the business. Where are you in that list? You should not be last. And, this was one thing that I was horrible at. I was always last. And when we started talking to the therapist, and, Tom always is telling me, like, go do what you enjoy. What do you want to do? And until I finally started listening and being unapologetic about this is my self-care and this is how I'm going to practice it, it didn't start working. So you've got to figure out what it looks like for you. We did an episode about this. It looks different for everyone.
Mhm.
So I can't tell you what to do to practice self-care, but I can tell you, you need to go and think about it, and you need to go and just start doing some things that feel good for you. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you're kind of sucky at taking care of everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I see this picture periodically make its rounds where it's like a cell phone and it's on like empty. It's like, well, what happens when your cell phone's on empty? How does it function? Not very good. Well, what do? You charge it back up. That's what self-care is.
Mhm.
And the way I look at it is every day thinking of a couple of categories of self-care and then doing at least one thing that helps. So for me, I look at like mental health. So I meditate.
Mhm.
I look at physical health. So I work out or I exercise. I look at relationships. So I spend time with you. I spend time with the kids in the morning, just like, when they're getting up and snuggling, and then I look at growth, because when we're all growing in something, whether it's a hobby we're doing, whether it's personal development, whether it's, we're learning for our business, to me, those 4 quadrants are all a key piece of my self-care that then help. So by thinking in that way, what people can be doing is saying, well, what are those quadrants for me? And what is the one thing that I can do for myself in each of those?
Yeah, I like it. It's very practical. All right. Action for today. Mine is think about something you've been feeling guilty about and post up what you're going to do about it. So comment on this post underneath on the show notes page, which is tomandariana.com/ what are we on 118. Or come and post up on our Facebook page and just say, hey, you told me to come post about what I was feeling guilty about. Here it is. This is what I'm going to do about this one thing I've been feeling guilty about.
Yeah. And, feel free to reach out because, we've been through this, and this is something that is really important. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't talk about. And especially, in like the business world and the entrepreneurship world, unfortunately, a lot of the focus is always on business and not enough on the entrepreneur or on the leader, and making sure that we're taken care of so that we can show up, not only for our business, our customers, and our team members, but also for our families and for ourselves. The one thing I want you guys to do, the action, is take some time every day to just reflect. And so you can do this in whatever way works for you. So for me, like I meditate. And while I'm meditating, I just see what thoughts come in and what am I feeling and what's a reoccurring theme that I need to first acknowledge and identify so I can do something with. For some people, it's journaling, right? For some people, it's, creating gratitudes. For some people, it's just talking to somebody else. Find whatever that is for you to reflect, and then just start incorporating that in, because the time you take to reflect will really help you get more connected to yourself and then be able to move forward on a lot of the stuff we talked about today.
Yeah. I love it.
Sweet.
All right. And if you are somebody who is struggling with some of this more personal stuff, not necessarily completely related to business, I would still encourage you to come and join us at Lifestyle Builders, because this is something that we talk about all the time. And it's something that's built right into our framework. Even in our incubator program, which the results are, we want you to make more sales in your business. We start off with the personal side of things and helping you walk through some of this stuff, like what you want your life to look like, and, kind of having your spouse come in and talk about it with you. So if you are interested in coming and joining us, you can go to joinlifestylebuilders.com.
All right.
It's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as always, I want you guys to remember that it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them.
Are you dreaming of a life of financial freedom and more time to spend with your loved ones? Want to build your business to support that dream? You need Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. Become a lifestyle builder at joinlifestylebuilders.com. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.